Indiana Jones. It's a podcast about Indiana Jones. Every movie, 1 minute at a time. Indiana Jones Minute.
Welcome back to the Indiana Jones Minute, the podcast in which we celebrate and discuss the film Raiders of the Lost Ark 1 minute at a time. I am Tom Taylor from IamTomTaylor.com.
I'm Pete Sherry Mummert from PeteRemembers.com.
I'm Gerald Christopher Marcus Porter.
And I am Eric Wells.
Welcome back, Eric.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Stuck with us in the Well of Souls, probably for the rest of our lives.
Well, for at least 1,000 years until we're worth something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be nice. It's something to look forward to. I've never been worth anything.
There you go. It'll take a while, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I got snakes.
And the good thing, you were always under that Tommy doesn't apply himself.
Yeah, now I don't have to. I'll just wait around
exactly.
for 1,000 years and it all falls into place.
Time does it for you.
This is minute 74. And minute 74 begins with Indy fighting with Marion, as usual, and it ends with Indy dropping a snake on her. What a jerk. This isn't going to mean anything to anybody except, well, it'll mean Jerry will know what I'm talking about, and if Mark Heideman's listening, he'll know what I'm talking about. When Indy, they start, they're fighting, they're still fighting from the last minute. About, how were you trying to escape and everything. And he starts to rip her dress, and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, help on the fire! And he sounds exactly like my dad when he was angry. Help on the fire! My dad's awesome. My dad's a super nice guy. I love him very much. When I was a kid, that's what he would sound like when he was angry. And I always hear that in the scene.
I had no idea what Indy was saying there. And
really?
I had no idea what your dad was saying when he was pissed either.
Yeah, you do. you were part of that a lot of the time.
I think the scene's funny, though, because Indy is ripping her dress to light it on fire. And we had John Brugan on, our snake expert, earlier this week. And he was telling us that snakes and legless lizards are actually attracted to warmth. Yeah. So it seems funny that Indy has actually been attracting the snakes the whole time.
Maybe that's why he hates them. They keep coming towards him because he shakes fire at them. He would just leave them alone.
Let's be honest. He really just hates the dress because Bullock gave it to her, right?
Yeah. No, that worked out great for him. He's like, oh, here, some fuel for the fire. Rip. The scene is pretty good. It's got it's got a little sort of 30s screwball comedy, bickering couple kind of feel to it. Again, Indy comes off as a complete jerk, completely tone deaf. He's like, he doesn't get why she might be annoyed with him, and he feels like he's in the right. But it's a good little banter moment with these guys.
Well, and it shows again that whatever the situation, they're great new damn partners.
And they always will be. I can't wait to see 3 or 4 more movies with them together.
Even when they're bickering.
I don't know if you want to see the next one with him, Tom.
What?
I just got
be careful
sad.
what I'm wishing
I just
for.
got sad really early in the
ring
minute.
the bell. Jerry got sad.
Well, and it's just a quick part of this minute, but one of my favorite shots of the whole movie is about halfway through where we have the close up with the snakes coming through the eye hole.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And I wondered, what did that look like on the other side? Did the snakes, or I guess legless lizards, did they just have a predilection for faces and eyes?
Yeah, how do they know from the other side?
Yeah, how do they know that?
That's funny.
Well, and our resident snake expert, who's on previous minutes, John, was saying that for them to be that high up on the wall, right? Yeah. You'd have to, where they're coming through the eyes and the heads. I mean, you would think then the room might be 4 or 5 feet deep in snakes.
Yeah. And he was picturing guys on the other side of the wall, just like grips or something, just feeding these legless lizards through the wall. That's disgusting.
That's what I wonder that with that scene too, because they pull back and it's not just the one eye, it's the whole wall, and you just think, you get 10 people there just cramming snakes through these holes.
I'm working on a movie. Hi, Mom.
Yeah. I've got this awesome new internship this summer.
Is this a Porky's reference? Well, I've got a question about the Egyptology here.
I just got that too.
So, thank you. So you've got the snake coming through, I think, Horus's eye. And to the left of Horus is like he's got the two people with him. And then is that Apep to the far left of him, or is that an Anubis? Well, like Tom asked in an earlier minute if I had ever seen an Anubis with kind of snarling teeth like the giant statues, and that made me wonder if that was something that existed, because I didn't know.
So yeah, not with Anubis that way. So yeah, if you look at that whole kind of wall scene, you've got what it essentially is it's a version of the weighing of the heart scene for the deceased. So when the individual dies, they're taken into the afterlife, and they're brought before a tribunal of the gods, and they take their heart, which for the Egyptians was where all your memory was at. It's the same way we would think of your brain or your mind. It was your place of emotion, of everything you would remember, and they would weigh that against the feather of truth. And what you can see is, if you kind of pause it, you can see that we see that feather scale on the one side, and then you've got a beast looking back, and that's Amut, and she's a part lion, hippo, and crocodile demon type god. And if your heart is heavier than the feather of truth, they would throw your heart to her and she would devour it, and they called that the second death. So in theory, if that happened, you were supposed to really be gone.
Did the feather weigh like 5 pounds?
So yeah, at this point, Indy climbs up the Anubis, and when he gets up to the mouth, he sees a snake. And our friend John, the snake guy, was telling us that the sound that you hear when he torches the snake is actually the sound of a rattlesnake. But the snake that's in front of him is actually a Burmese python. And then the snake that falls onto Marion's neck is a ball python, which is the only snake in the scene that's actually an African snake.
Movie magic.
Well, and so what I thought about we have a rattlesnake and then a Burmese python and all these. I'm trying on those pants again, and I'm thinking this is, I mean, the snakes being in the well of the souls is clearly an act of God. It's divine intervention. I think this is Yahweh spicing it up. Yeah. And he gathered just different snakes from all over the place, and he's just having fun.
Just like Frank Marshall, who actually had to call everybody around Europe and get all the snakes they could get to the site.
And he threw some legless lizards in. It's kind of like a knuckleball. Which Eric, what do you think of this whole Shishak thing?
In terms of whether or not...
well, first of all, do you think he was treated poorly by Yahweh?
In your opinion.
Yeah, in your opinion. Do you think God's double dipping because he kind of hoes the Hebrews, and then, Shishak gets the ark and he takes it back and he builds what appears to be, quite a nice resting place for the Ark of the Covenant. And he seemed to cross his T's and dot his I's, and he put a couple of nice gargoyles up, and they're appropriate, that sort of thing. And, he still gets his city wiped clean by the wrath of God. And it's like, he's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Well, I think, again, you just don't want to piss Yahweh off.
That's the lesson.
Really, what we need to blame is we really need to blame Ray, right? Because Ray should be stepping up to take care of his boy here.
So this would be an example of the Falcon malfunctioning.
Jesus.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, and let's also, this also doesn't speak too well of Yahweh. I mean, Yahweh is essentially, the turning into the God who wants people to fight over him. The Hebrews aren't being too good, so he's going to let somebody come in and kick their butt, but then he wants somebody else to come in and kick these guys' butt. I mean, it's
like me playing The Sims. That's what I do. I just mess with them constantly.
Or he's kind of in a Marion situation. Is this guy going to do it? Nah, this guy's being kind of a jerk. How about this guy? Nah, this guy's being kind of a jerk. Maybe I'll go back to this guy.
Well, see, I think Shishak is doing a decent job as far as I can tell. He just happens to be, he was on the wrong team.
Yahweh, whenever the Hebrews get too big for themselves, he's all about, we'll enslave them for a while. We'll, the Babylonians can take them over, the Persians. We'll go ahead and put them into servitude for a few generations. I mean, really, it's not a good deal for the Hebrews. I think whoever Yahweh moves to at the time is just really to kind of make them jealous and punish them.
That's very Old Testament, yeah. Well, I want to know, as a complete novice to all this, I always want to know, Marcus is telling the story at the beginning of the movie to the Army intelligence guys, and he's like, the Egyptian pharaoh Shishak may have taken the ark back to the city of... is that 100% made up by the movie, or is there any kind of historical... is Shishak actually one of the possible, last owners of the lost ark? Is there anything to that story?
So most people what they look at it. I mean, there is some debate, although I think most would agree that Shishak, who's a Libyan pharaoh, actually not a native Egyptian pharaoh, is actually the Shishak from the Bible. Most would agree with that. And then I believe what that then gets into is in the biblical text. It tells us that he goes in and we have a destruction and then a sacking. So that is kind of where people will associate that and say, okay, well, if we're looking at a pharaoh who, according to the Bible, goes in, invades Judah, takes the treasures from the Temple of Solomon, it could, in theory, be that the Ark of the Covenant was one of those treasures. And I think that's, I mean, you're kind of stretching, but if people wanted to argue for the veracity of it, that's what they would do.
Half-court shot here, Eric. And, if you make it, you win the car. Or, 4 years to UCLA. Where is the Ark of the Covenant?
Oh gosh, I mean, in reality, probably melted down.
Oh man,
not much metal survives from the ancient world. Metal is pretty precious, even bronze, but especially precious metals, and that's even within Egypt. We look at it today and we think these objects, these historical objects, have so much value, but that's a relatively new conception, and we see going back to Egypt, that one of the things they would do is they would take out coffins and they would just burn them to try to free the gilding that was on them, and then because you couldn't, if you were caught with that, people would obviously know this was stolen or where it came from, so they would then try to melt it down into either bars or something like that, and then use simply to sell it. So my guess would be that whatever had existed was probably stolen or taken when the temple was destroyed, and then probably melted down, whether that was by the Babylonians, whether that was by Shishak, probably taking those treasures and then just repurposing them, taking the gold off of it, whatever that would be. And the best thing about my theory is it can never really be disproven unless you find the ark. So
That's true.
It's a win-win.
yeah.
Well, all right. Does anybody have anything else for minute 74?
So one thing here that always gets me about this scene is the Anubis kind of screaming is really weird.
That's good to hear.
Him with his jaws open. I've never seen that, and it's also one of the weird things here where it's I think it's part of the whole issue with the Well of Souls where it's really from just a standpoint of Egyptian art. It's mixing elements of what would be a temple, elements of what would be a tomb. We're looking at the weighing of the heart scene we talked about, which is strictly funerary. But then here we're dealing with the type of architecture you would find in a temple. So there's definitely some weirdness going on here.
Well, that's movies for you. We're not surprised anymore by this movie taking liberties with movies or logic or history or any of it. It's all part of Raiders. Well, Pete, why don't you tell the nice people where they can find us and express their sadness that the ark has been melted down and this whole movie is moot now.
Well, before you find us, I highly recommend that you go find Eric at Eric's Guide to Ancient Egypt podcast. It is absolutely fabulous, and it's one of my favorite podcasts. And if you like history or you like Egyptology, most definitely give it a listen. And if you like us, you can find us at IndianaJonesMinute.com. We even have an archaeology section on our webpage, or find us on Facebook or our Facebook Listener Society, Indiana Jones and the Listeners Crusade.
Yeah, please stop by, share your thoughts. And please come back tomorrow for minute 75 of Raiders of the Lost Ark here on the Indiana Jones Minute. Hell in the fire!
Jones!
Whatever you're doing, do it faster.